music. The open meeting law requires that I notify the public that this meeting is being recorded. Therefore, please be aware that an audio and visual recording of this meeting is being made and broadcast by Boston City TV, which is a part of the City of Boston Office of Cable Communications. And the first item is request authorization for the approval of minutes of July 13, 2017.
So moved.
Second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Item number 2, request authorization to enter into a lease agreement with Boston Print Specialists, LLC, doing business as Alpha Graphics Boston, for the use of approximately 7,342 square feet of the 8th floor of 12 Channel Street. Dennis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alpha Graphics is a franchised chain of independent-owned and operated full-service print shops. They've been looking for a South Boston location for some time. We've showed them several spaces over the last several months, and they're interested in leasing Suite 804 and 12 Channel Street. As you said, the suite is about 7,400 square feet. It has no air conditioning or office improvements. They'll utilize the space for marketing, design, and production of print materials, very similar to the way the businesses at Seaport Graphics and Copy Cop operated out of 12 Channel Street when they were our tenants. We're proposing an 8-year term. The rent will start at $17.50 per square foot, triple net, and will increase by $1 per square foot up to $24.50 during the final year of the lease term. That's a very good as-is rate. We are offering to install an air conditioning system at a cost not to exceed $100,000. In the event we do that, the cost of the air conditioning will be repaid on top of the rent with interest during the term of the lease. And the minimum guaranteed revenue during the lease term will exceed $1.2 million.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. Are there any questions? Hearing none, a motion's in order?
So moved.
Second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you.
Item number 3, request authorization to enter into a lease agreement with Design Communications Limited for the use of approximately 5,212 square feet of the 8th floor of 12 Channel Street. Dennis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Design Communications Limited is a leading fabricator of custom signage. They've been located in the Raymond Flynn Marine Park for over 20 years, occupying 50,000 square feet in the building now known as the Innovation and Design Building. Design Communications can no longer afford to keep such a large manufacturing footprint in that facility, and they have subsequently purchased a building in a western suburb. However, it's imperative to the business model that they maintain a Boston presence, specifically a South Boston presence. We've been helping them look for affordable 3,000 to 5,000 square foot space for quite some time. Once we decided to consider subdividing an existing 20,000 square foot space on the 8th floor of 12 Channel Street, we contacted Design Communications to gauge their interest, and I'm happy to report that they've decided to rent the space. They've agreed to rent for a 7-year term. The suite is completely bare with no improvements whatsoever. The 7-year lease will start at $13 a square foot and increase annually up to $22 a square foot. The guaranteed rent will exceed $800,000, which is, we think, a very fair rate to both parties, especially considering the EDIC will not be spending any funds whatsoever bringing the space up to condition to market.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the board? Hearing none, a motion's in order?
So moved.
Second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 4, request authorization to advertise and issue a request for qualifications for engineering and design services for mechanical system upgrades at 22 Dry Dock Ave in the Raymond L. Flynn Marine Park. Ed.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Secretary Paul Hemus. This item requests your authorization to issue an RFQ with the aim of determining the cost and the feasibility of installing a central air conditioning system within 22 Dry Dock Avenue. The building, as I think you know, dates back to World War II. It's built of cinder block and brick. The building gets cold in the winter despite the improvements that we've done, and very hot in the summer. The many window units that we use to cool the building are inherently inefficient, and they're costly to operate. They're also very noisy. It's not uncommon to be conducting a staff meeting and having, with the window unit on and having to strain to hear or be heard. So we think that over time, a central cooling system has the potential to pay for itself, and accordingly, we ask the board's approval to issue an RFQ for design services in an amount not to exceed $50,000, and that amount is included in the capital budget for this year.
Okay, thank you, Ed. Are there any questions from the board? Hearing none, a motion's in order?
So moved.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you, Ed. Item number 5, request authorization to advertise and issue a request, request authorization to advertise and issue a request for proposals for a consultant to perform a feasibility study regarding creating career pathways in the creative economy. Lauren.
Good afternoon, Chairman Burke, Madam Secretary, and members of the board. Thank you for allowing me to speak this afternoon. My name is Lauren Costello. I'm a senior research analyst with the Mayor's Office of Workforce Development. The Office of Workforce Development is requesting to be authorized to advertise a request for proposals for a consultant to perform a feasibility study regarding creating career pathways in the creative economy. A little bit of background. In June 2016, Mayor Walsh announced the Boston Creates Cultural Plan, a 10-year initiative that will align public and private resources to strengthen cultural vitality over the long term and weave arts and culture into the fabric of everyday life. Cities with high levels of creative capital encourage, reward, and integrate imaginative thinking into all aspects of community life. Boston wants to better understand the creative capital of Boston and develop a plan that will prioritize, coordinate, and align public and private resources to strengthen this creative capital over the long term. A portion of the Boston Creates Cultural Plan is a joint venture between Emerson College, Massachusetts College of Art and Design, and the Mayor's Office of Workforce Development to look at designing and implementing a creative industries workforce development program. This venture would also utilize the area's schools to identify Bostonians who would be trained for jobs in the city's arts and culture institutions and industry. OWD staff requests that an RFP be issued to procure the services of a research and/or consultant team to conduct a feasibility assessment of higher education training programs that provide career pathways in the creative economy sector. This assessment will investigate programs already in operation, as well as programs in the pipeline for future development, particularly as it relates to Emerson College and Mass Art, both highly respected leaders in providing exceptional educational opportunities in the arts and creative industries. In order to further develop and implement career pathways and workforce development opportunities in the creative economy, it is recommended that the OWD be authorized to engage outside professional services to assist them in this effort as part of the Boston Creates Cultural Plan. The estimated contract amount will be $75,000, with funding support coming from the Neighborhood Jobs Trust in the amount of $50,000 and Emerson College providing $25,000. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from the board? Hearing none, the motion's in order.
So moved.
Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you. Item number 5, personnel. Moran.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Madam Secretary, and Director Golden. I have a few items for your consideration. We have 4 new appointments. Michael Sinatra for Project Manager in the Development Review with a start date of September 5th. Joe Olivia Barros in the Planning Department for Assistant to the Director of Planning position with a start date of the 14th of August. And Herbert Bond in the OWD Division for an Outreach Coordinator position with a start date of August 21st. We also have a 1-year grant agreement for a startup manager, as well as 6 departures. Rebecca Emanuel, Marcia Gellin, Colin Cruzy, Catherine McKendels, Lauren Costello, and Wanda Ming.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from the board?
What's a startup manager? Is that, oh, sorry. I was just curious.
No.
Sorry.
What is it?
I'm sorry, Ms. Ross. The startup manager is a position that has been within the agency for the past several years, and it fundamentally looks at entrepreneurs in the innovative sector.
Startup, like startups.
Exactly.
Got it.
So they help facilitate their arrival and the beginning of their operations in Boston, working with them on everything from siting to logistics around the siting and financing and accessing different economic development support programs both within the city and the state. So it's been a position that we've utilized longer than I've been here. I'd say it's over a decade.
Cool. Yeah, I was just curious.
Any further questions? Then motion's in order.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you, Moran. Okay, I need a motion to adjourn the EDIC meeting.
I move we adjourn the EDIC meeting.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Meeting adjourned. The open meeting law requires that I notify the public that this meeting is being recorded. Therefore, please be aware that an audio and visual recording of this meeting is being made and broadcast by Boston City TV, which is a part of the City of Boston Office of Cable Communications. And the first item on the agenda is request authorization for the approval of minutes of July 13, 2017 meeting. Motion's in order?
So moved.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Item number 2, request authorization to schedule a public hearing on September 14, 2017 at 5:30 p.m. or at a date and time to be determined by the director to consider the development plan for Planned Development Area number 113 at 159 through 201 Washington Street in Brighton. Motion's in order?
So moved.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Item number 3, Board of Appeal. Any changes?
No changes.
Jeff is not here, that's a change.
This is a change.
No changes, okay. The motion's in order to
So
accept
mo-
the Board of Appeal?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you. Item number 4, request authorization to adopt the Imagine Boston 2030 plan as a long-term citywide plan for Boston, which will guide the growth, development, and investment in Boston over the coming decades. John? Or Sarah?
I'll start. Thank you, Chairman, members of the board, Madam Secretary, Director Golden. We are excited to be before you today to talk about the culmination of the Imagine Boston 2030 planning effort and present the framework and guidelines for your adoption. This is intended to be a living document that will continue to inform work throughout the city, not just the BPDA, but in close collaboration with all of the other city departments. Tad will walk through the key elements of the plan. I believe that you all have copies of the plan, and then we also have copies for you of the, there's a newspaper pamphlet version that was a summary that's also been distributed in the community, and we'll give you those as well. So, thank you. Tad?
Okay, thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah. Chairman Berg, Secretary Rojas, Vice Chairman Rojas, Secretary Polimas, and Director Golden. 2 years ago, with the strong support of Mayor Walsh, you, the board, authorized the director to issue an RFP for the city's first citywide plan in 50 years, with the express purpose to develop a shared understanding of the city's collective values and aspirations for the future in order to translate these into a coherent and flexible framework for the physical growth and change of Boston. So today we're pleased to present Imagine Boston 2030 for your approval. I want to help you get acquainted with the plan so that we may all use the plan as our guide to shaping planning and development in the city going forward. It is a big document. It can seem a little daunting, so I want to begin when I can find the pointer. By showing you a cheat sheet, and this cheat sheet is on pages 6 and 7 of the document. If you're ever feeling a little overwhelmed or lost, go here, because this simplifies it. All right, so what we have on the far left is what we're calling context. That looks at all the data and all the input we've received that forms the foundation for the plan, that continues into the opportunity for growth. Then the major moves, the big spatial moves of the plan, are elaborated in the taking action section. So that is, for the planning purposes, the meat of this document. The next section following taking action are a series of initiatives that do not necessarily focus on spatial issues, but apply to the city as a whole and involve collaboration between any number of city departments, and I will be touching on those as well. And then the final section of the document deals with how we're going to make it happen. It deals with next steps, or in other words, implementation. We engaged over 15,000 residents and workers in Boston during this process. As you can imagine, this kind of citywide engagement does not happen very often. And so it really required some creative strategies to reach out to all Bostonians, perhaps in ways that we hadn't tried before. So I'd just like to highlight a couple of those methods before going on to describe the plan. One was a text message survey instrument using telephones and an application called Textizen, where we were able to reach people on their phones when they were able to respond. They didn't have to come to a meeting, and we collected a lot of really useful data this way. 2,400 people participated in the text message surveys. We also used an online mobile app that allowed people to engage from their computers, to pull up specific geographic areas of the plan, look at what was proposed, and provide comments. There were street teams. We had dozens of people fan out to different parts of the city where they were, to grocery stores, to T-stops, and engage them by answering surveys. This is unprecedented in the city. We used building blocks, actually Legos, to help community members, particularly children, begin to imagine the city's physical shape into the future. And of course, many of you participated in the Forums on the Future, where we engage thought leaders and historians in conversations about Imagine Boston 2030. We got a lot of terrific feedback, and I think most of you have been involved enough to know that we heard a lot about the need for affordable housing and the need for improved access to transit, concerns about climate change and sea level rise, concerns about access to parks and open space, and concerns about inequality in the city and how we can come together to create a Boston in which everyone can prosper. So while we engage directly with Bostonians in many different kinds of conversations, a critical part of our work also involved looking at data, and this was very important as well. Much of the data echoed and reinforced what we were hearing from the public, so much of this is no surprise. There are 6 key data points that I think crystallize the opportunities and challenges facing the city. You may have heard some of these before, but I think they bear repeating. This slide, for example, compares typical productivity of Boston worker to the average national worker in dollars, and shows that Boston workers are roughly 33% more productive than the average annual worker. What this means is that Boston is attractive to employers. Employers want to be here, and we have a very fast-growing economy and employment pace. As many of you know, our population bottomed out in about 1950. It grew steadily until about 2010, and then we started to see a very sharp spike in our growth. And we expect that to continue to the year 2030, and where we're projecting a population of 724,000 people. We need to make decisions about where those people will live and work. Inequality. There are many different measures of inequality, and one of them is something that the Federal Reserve Bank researched and came up with, and that is the difference in median net worth between the average white household in Boston and households of color is dramatically different, with white households averaging about $250,000 in net worth, and you can see where the numbers are with other minority groups. It's a very stark difference. Here, in terms of median household income, on the upper line, you see Boston on the left at about 56,000, the USA median household income at about 53,000. Not a very, very big difference. But when you look down below, the median home value in Boston, $464,000 compared to the median value in the USA. So it's difficult for people to afford ownership housing here, and this creates a problem for creating personal wealth. One major way to create personal wealth is through home ownership. And when that's not accessible, there's an issue with creating individual wealth in the city. And of course, many of you have already heard that we're anticipating about 3 feet of sea level rise by the year 2030. Finally, as many of us know, we've seen this with the sharing economy, with on-demand travel and services such as Uber and Lyft. We're hearing a lot about it with the automated vehicles. We know that technology is changing quickly and that we're going to need to adapt to that as well. So the message that I'd like to convey is that we're not retreating from our challenges. We're facing them head on with an action plan that will allow us to grow our population and jobs sustainably and equitably, preserving what we cherish most about Boston while creating promising opportunities for vibrant, mixed-use, equitable, transit-oriented, and climate-ready development. And so what are we going to do exactly? And that's where we come to the taking action section of the plan. There are 5 key action areas which I will describe in turn. And these are, and these will make a little more sense as I talk through them: enhance neighborhoods, encourage a mixed-use core, expand neighborhoods, generate networks of opportunity, and create a waterfront future, a waterfront for future generations. So let's start with enhanced neighborhoods. And here we're talking about existing established neighborhoods from Charlestown and East Boston to Dorchester, Roxbury, and Mattapan. There's a lot we love about these neighborhoods that we don't want to change. And at the same time, there are opportunities for growth and enhancement. So, for example, we want to continue to maintain and expand affordable housing. We love the character of many of these neighborhoods. We don't want that to change. We want to preserve it. And we want to add contextually sensitive development that fits into the neighborhood. At the same time, creating closer access to jobs and improved transportation connections will help with that. As we add jobs, as we add more uses, we want more amenities for everyday life, shopping, grocery shopping opportunities, and other retail opportunities. We also want community gathering spaces and public spaces, and we want to make sure that we're preventing displacement. A good example of an enhanced neighborhood initiative that has already taken place is the JP Rocks plan, where, as you may recall, we preserved existing residential neighborhoods near Columbus Avenue and Washington Street, but increased the amount of development allowed in the commercial corridors, allowing additional housing and creating incentives, substantial incentives for new affordable housing. Another upcoming strategic planning area that will begin in the fall, consistent with enhanced neighborhoods, is will be a planning process for Upham's Corner. We'll be looking at additional policies to ensure and preserve affordable housing, catalyzing investments around transit stops, improving connections to those transit stops, and improving service on the Fairmount line, supporting local businesses, artists and entrepreneurs, supporting and enhancing arts and culture, and investing in open space. The next major action area in the plan is something we're calling the mixed-use core, encouraging the mixed-use core. And I think the best way to think about this is to think about the traditional high spine, which is the tall line of buildings that runs from downtown through the Back Bay, and think about extending that high line, that sort of quintessential downtown area into the Longwood Medical area and the Fenway, into Boston University and Beacon Yards, down through Harrison, the Harrison-Albany district, and out to the Seaport district. So think of this as an extension of traditional downtown and High Spine, where we want to continue job growth, but at the same time start encouraging more housing to create a greater balance between jobs and housing and create that vibrancy in these neighborhoods, 24-hour vibrancy that actually creates a destination. Now, there's plenty of historic architecture in these neighborhoods which we want to be sure to preserve. So we want the development to respond to the existing context. We want to create resources and amenities for a new population. And of course, in many of the areas, we want to make sure that we're prepared for climate change. A good example of a planning initiative that is outlined in Imagine Boston 2030, in the document it's called Shawmut Peninsula 2100. We think that we may be the only ones who know what the Shawmut Peninsula is, so let's just, for our purposes, call it downtown planning, where we're going to be looking at development of major underdeveloped sites in the downtown, the continued maintenance and expansion of affordable housing, anti-displacement measures, hard and soft flood defenses, infrastructure, particularly transit infrastructure that enables long-term growth and connectivity. Again, amenities for workers, visitors, and the growing residential population, and diverse open spaces. Now, the third major action area is something we are calling expanded neighborhoods. Let me start by listing what these are. You can see on the chart. These are Beacon Yards, 4-Point Channel, Newmarket and Wydette, Reedville, Suffolk Downs, and Sullivan Square. And you can see these in the purple blobs on the map up here. So expanded neighborhoods are where we envision the lion's share of future growth in the city. Many of these areas share in common certain characteristics. For example, there's significant amount of vacant and underutilized land in most of these areas. There's proximity to major transportation infrastructure, including transit and roadways, creating excellent opportunities for transit-oriented development. Many of these are located at the edges of existing neighborhoods, representing gaps in the fabric of the city and creating an opportunity to reknit the fabric of the city. It's important to note also that these areas have different ownership circumstances, so that some of these areas like Beacon Yards and Suffolk Downs have a single landowner, and we look forward to working with those single landowners in master planning those areas. Other areas have multiple landowners, and of course we envision something more like the strategic planning area process that we've carried out in other areas. So Beacon Yards, just going in alphabetical order, stands to benefit from its close proximity to other major employment centers such as Harvard, Kendall, Boston University, and the Longwood Medical area. It's also located right on top of the I-90 Turnpike, and the recent I-90 interchange redesign process will set the stage for a walkable street grid and access to a new transit hub at West Station that will create a significant transit-oriented development opportunity here. We see this as connecting existing neighborhoods better to one another and to the Charles River, creating signature open spaces, including new open space along the Charles River, and again, reknitting the fabric of the city. Four-Point Channel sits around critical waterways at the intersection of historic downtown and the fast-growing South Boston Seaport District. So we think this has the potential to become a destination with jobs, housing, and open space. We envision that investments in green space could support not only ecological restoration, but also reduce vulnerability to flooding. We think the presence of Gillette, GE, and the 4 Points arts community provide opportunities for new partnerships in arts and culture. And we know that completing a walkable street grid will be an important part of setting the stage for a vibrant neighborhood here. New Market and Wydett Circle, given the industrial heritage of this area, existing industrial businesses, and of course the rail lines along the Fairmount, this has strong potential for strengthening industrial uses and for redevelopment that connects the adjacent communities and creates dense, mixed-use center for jobs. New housing along the edges of existing neighborhoods will also strengthen connections to jobs. All of this will require investments in high-quality transit service and flood protection. In Reedville, we envision a 21st century manufacturing district that creates quality jobs and encourages TOD. We see the opportunity for both the preservation and enhancement of industrial uses and a mix of uses, including housing, to create a true neighborhood. This will all require improvements to the Fairmount line, which I'll talk about in a little bit, as well as improvements to streets and walking and biking infrastructure. Ultimately, this could connect in the other direction on the Fairmount line, not only to downtown, but to further out destinations such as Dedham, again, reinforcing those economic development opportunities. At Suffolk Downs, Suffolk Downs is immediately adjacent to 2 stops on the Blue Line and Route 1. It's also sandwiched between Belle Isle Marsh and the Chelsea River. So it's a beautiful location. We see it as a great opportunity for transit-oriented development with a mix of uses, the opportunity to strengthen industrial uses. At the same time, given the sensitivity of the natural environment in this area, there are opportunities for creating open space that also functions as flood protection. And there's really an important need for an overall resiliency strategy in Suffolk Downs. Sullivan Square also, I think, would stand to benefit from the momentum that we're seeing in Assembly Square, Union Square, Kendall Square, Everett, and downtown Boston. It's, of course, sitting right on top of the Sullivan Square T-stop on the Orange Line. As you know, we did some planning that was formed part of the land disposition study 3 or 4 years ago, and we plan to build on that to establish a new walkable street grid, take advantage of publicly owned land in the area for development sites, and look at other development possibilities in the area along Rutherford Avenue on publicly owned land. Oops, what happened? Okay. So the last thing to say about Sullivan Square is that their areas of Sullivan Square are low-lying, and we're already looking as part of Climate Ready Boston at opportunities for creating defenses along the edge of the river there. Since the Central Artery came down and the Rose Kennedy Greenway have come in, since the harbor has been cleaned up, our relationship with the water has changed from just an economic one really to a recreational and aesthetic one, and we value that resource. Just as the harbor was a resource for maritime trade in the future, it will continue to be a resource for maritime industry, but also a place for jobs, housing, access to the harbor, and new signature parks. The waterfront in the future, we think, will be inclusive. It will be for all Bostonians. It will be climate resilient, and it will need to have strong stewardship for sustainable funding structures. One of the things I mentioned before was the stark inequalities that we see in the city, and there's no area of the city that brings this into relief better than neighborhoods flanking the Fairmount line. And so one of the big moves called for in Imagine Boston 2030 is the creation of networks of opportunity along the Fairmount line. Here we see many different opportunities, which I'll point out. One is significant investment in the Fairmount line itself, so that we're talking about, over time, increasing investments in, particularly in trains and the types of trains used to increase frequencies along that line, investing in connections to the stations along the line, connecting, making better connections for those neighborhoods to both downtown Boston and new employment opportunities in Reedville, making the most of this beautiful jewel of a park that is Franklin Park by improving and enhancing that park so that it serves not only the needs and desires of the people nearby, but also the, becomes a desirable place to go for all Bostonians. Improving connections along from Columbia Road, from Franklin Park to Joe Moakley Park by greening up Columbia Road and including more sustainable forms of transportation and improving the experience of walking and biking down that street. And of course, many of this sorry about that. A big part of this, which I'll talk about in just a moment, is investments in Upham's Corner. So that summarizes the big spatial initiatives in the plan, and I just wanted to take a minute to talk about some of the major initiatives that, again, aren't the responsibility of the BPDA, but will in many cases involve us. And there are 10 key initiatives. They're listed here. They're listed in the table of contents in your plan. One is, as part of the housing section, strong anti-displacement policies that have to do with strengthening expansion and expanding eviction and foreclosure prevention, tenant organizing, home ownership assistance, and so on. Again, not our responsibility, but investing in public schools, particularly in the Fairmount neighborhood, and of course, strengthening economic opportunities for all Bostonians. So continued growth in our strongest sectors, such as healthcare and education, diversifying sectoral strengths, supporting business development for industrial sectors, creating an environment in which small businesses can start, grow, and scale, and encouraging job training. And finally, a variety of open space investments throughout the city. We heard from folks that they wanted to improve access to and the quality of our parks, and there are a variety of initiatives that you can peruse in the plan. So in terms of implementation and next steps, just to wrap up, the city has set a set of metrics to guide, that is to measure how we are doing using this. So this is not a plan that will sit on a shelf. It'll be a living, breathing plan that we will continue to utilize over time. And there's also a section of the plan that that you can find towards the end that says exactly what departments in the city will be responsible for implementing which sections of the plan. So just in closing, we're facing unprecedented population and housing growth. We have a robust economy, glaring inequality. Preserving and increasing affordable housing are challenges and imperatives, as is the need to prevent displacement. And we're vulnerable to climate change and sea level rise. So Imagine Boston 2030 addresses these challenges by reinvesting in transit, schools, parks, housing, arts and culture, and other important assets, particularly serving underserved neighborhoods such as those in the Fairmount corridor. Promoting strategic and contextually sensitive development and investment in existing neighborhoods and districts while directing the lion's share of new development to vacant and underutilized land near transit and roadway infrastructure. Improving access to and stewardship of the waterfront, and setting in place policies and programs that promote our values of equity, fairness, inclusion, and great placemaking. That concludes the presentation.
Thank you very much. Very good. Good job.
Thank you.
I just want to say from the onset, I want to congratulate you and Sarah and all the staff that participated in this. Also, the fact that you were able to get so many residents of the city to be involved, almost 15,000 people. And it's a pretty amazing document, and it really is going to enhance the quality of life for all the residents of the city, but future generations too. And I just want to thank you for your work and for this document, so thank you.
Thank you.
Any comments or questions from the Board?
I have a question. So with the, I love it, by the way. Love that, we've broken things down into actually actionable steps and assigned owners and kind of how we're going to do this. I think that definitely, making that transparent is huge. So is there someone overall that is going to be responsible for kind of tracking and measuring and kind of saying, okay, holistically, how are we doing? When you bring all the parts together of, D&D and BPDA or all of these agencies, who's responsible for kind of seeing how we're doing?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. A key component of all of this is really focusing on how we're breaking down the traditional silos and collaborating in a different way. And so how do we continue to monitor that and make sure that we're holding to a lot of the commitments in this plan? Essentially what's happening in terms of implementation here is that each of the cabinets will be having quarterly reports on the initiatives that they have underway. That what they'll do is identify through a Gantt chart what would be a fiscal year 17, fiscal year 18, and then in chunks of 5 years beyond that, since this is a plan to 2030 and beyond, what they'd be focused on. And then your weekly or your quarterly cabinet report will talk about that and talk about the steps that you've taken to move the needle on those initiatives, and then what are your next steps. There's also a focus as it relates to the metrics here of including an element of that in a future version of City Score. So the city's data team is looking to see how we can include that. The metrics you'll see in the plan are directional, so we're looking for an increase in this or a decrease in that. It's not working towards a hard number, but the idea here is to be able to have something that's a measurable metric that could be incorporated into a version of City Score 2.0 or 3.0. Those components of implementation are still underway, and so that's the work that Natalia, who has taken over for Rebecca, is really working on with the city's data team to move this from an implementation chart in the plan to actionable Gantt charts, quarterly reports from the cabinet, and some sort of a measurable metric that will go on the dashboard. So
Awesome. And one last question, or just to get your thoughts on it. How much of this are we really able to kind of control within the city and really get executed with our kind of city departments and agencies versus what we're going to need cooperation or partnership with the state or at a federal level? Kind of how much are we?
And I think that truly speaks to when the design of the metrics here being directional as opposed to setting hard numbers, acknowledging that many of these aspirations and goals are also heavily reliant on policies that are outside of our control, both the state and federal level. So I think what we're looking here is where can we make the minor moves that we need to make at the city level, or major in some cases, but that will be enhanced by other moves at other levels as well. And then where can we be advocates for what we need at the state level and at the federal level? And I think that this document provides an excellent framework for that advocacy as well, that we know will be crucially important to advancing the overall goals as it relates to more equitable growth in the city.
Well, I just want to comment that I think this is really a quite extraordinary piece of work. I've seen a lot of long-range plans for cities and urban areas, and invariably they focus on a set of quantitative metrics, usually around transit or infrastructure development or hopes for a certain type of financial development or job generation. And this one starts, I think quite appropriately, with a statement of values and aspirations. So it starts from an assumption that there are certain quality of life factors, not all of which fit easily into traditional quantitative metrics. And it's a framework that will be filled out by a number of people moving forward. It's comprehensive and it's inclusive in a way that I've never seen in other plans. It clearly has made an effort to engage all of the city departments that are going to have to deliver on this. So while it's planning staff here and folks in the mayor's office and other folks who've taken the lead on this, It's quite clear that other city departments understand that they have to be engaged with the implementation of a number of the initiatives here over a period of time. It's also a plan that I think quite interestingly deals with culture and demographics and the role of the arts in the city and preservation initiatives to protect the fabric of many of our neighborhoods. And I think that you should be most proud of the fact that this is a courageous document and a courageous effort in that it doesn't gloss over the challenges of gentrification or displacement or inequalities in the city. A lot of plans just kind of look at what you can build and not look at who you're building it for and what the outcomes or secondary or tertiary benefits or detriments are that might occur when you build in a particular way. Deals with health and education, and there's obviously been a lot of input from young people in the city who are the folks who are going to be here in 2030. So I commend the staff here for creating a document and a process that is widely engaging and accessible. And maybe Chairman Burke will hold up what the book looks like, because very few people have seen the book. The book is not something that a lot of people will necessarily get their hands on, although it's my understanding that it's being distributed to libraries and other public facilities around the city. But the plan itself, which I find quite elegant, is posted on the city's website in a way that makes it even more accessible. It's written in a way that is not full of planning jargon, which makes it, I think, a lot easier for people to see what it is we're really trying to do in terms of achieving these values and aspirations. And I just commend all involved for doing really a great piece of work.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's no further questions and you completed your presentation, a motion is in order.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Really, you did a great job.
Thank you.
Item number 5. Request authorization to enter into an amended license agreement with the Courageous Sailing Center to allow the use of a portion of Pier 4 in the Charlestown Navy Yard for a youth sailing program. Ed?
Once again, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and Secretary Paul Hemus. The staff is asking the board's approval to extend an existing license agreement with the Courageous Sailing Center to permit the continued use of a portion of Pier 4 in the Charlestown Navy Yard for a youth sailing program. The Sailing Center has been in operation for 30 years and is a registered 501c3 public charity. Financial support comes from major donors such as the Cummings Foundation and John Hancock. The center serves annually more than 1,500 Boston youth each year, all free of charge. And even though it was many long years ago, as a father, I'm happy to say all my kids went through the program and they all had a ball. The extension of the existing license is sought to give the center additional time to realize its goal of attracting sufficient support from the business community and to make major capital improvements to the facilities over the course of a future long-term lease agreement. The proposed license agreement will extend the arrangement for 1 year, has a license fee of $1, and provides that the center will indemnify and protect this agency against any liability associated with its use as a pier.
Okay, thank you, Ed. Any questions from the board? Hearing none, a motion's in order.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you, Ed. Item number 6. Request authorization to enter into a license agreement with the Bunker Hill Community College to allow use of parcel P15B-1 for student parking.
Thank you. With the board's approval, we are seeking to enter into a license agreement that will formalize the use of 2 BRA parcels for use by Bunker Hill Community College for surface parking for the students, for the school's students, faculty, and staff. Just as importantly, this agreement will indemnify the agency from any claims and will provide a revenue stream from parking passes that have been issued by the school. And here you can see the 2 parcels that would be included in this. It represents an area of just over 6 acres. Agency staff initially approached the college and representatives of DCAM in early 2016 to discuss current and long-term potential uses on the site. For those of you who know the site, it offers easy access to downtown. More importantly, the MBTA Orange Line station directly abuts the school, and I'm trying to point out where it is with this thing. I'm not sure, but the Orange Line is immediately adjacent to the college. Now, college is a valued partner with the city of Boston, but I think all of us would agree that surface parking, especially in an area that is so well served by public transportation, doesn't really represent the potential highest and best use of the land. Over the longer term, it's reasonable to expect that a dialogue will occur between all concerned parties as to what the highest and best uses might be and the means to attain those ends. In the immediate term, however, the agency needs to be indemnified and to share in the revenue derived from the use of our land. The proposed license agreement has a term of 1 year to be extended by mutual agreement of both of the parties.
Okay, thank you. Ed, any questions from the board? Hearing none, a motion's in order?
So moved.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you, Ed. Item number 7, request authorization to extend the tentative designation of P3 Partners LLC as redeveloper of a portion of parcel P3 and a portion of parcel P3H in the Campus High School Urban Renewal Area. Dana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Secretary Paul Hemus, and Director Golden. Here before you to request the extension to the tentative designation for P3 Partners. The development team has been working pretty assiduously and diligently on various aspects of their tentative designation, most specifically the securing of financing associated with the project, which is still an ongoing process, securing tenants for the proposed project. Most significantly, in the recent months, they have secured a new housing partnership developer in the form of, by the name of Twining Properties, which has replaced Landmarks as their development partner, and they have agreed to follow the same procedures and principles that have been outlined by the Oversight Committee in terms of multifamily housing creation and the affordable housing component that was agreed upon in their Article 80 approvals. The need for this extension really is to allow for the significant amount of work that needs to get done, not only in pulling together the confirmation of financing, but also some of the other logistical work between the development team and the Boston Public Schools on some of the site configuration, as well as the process of looking at some of the public funding requests that are being made. So.
Okay. Thank you, Dana. Any questions from the board?
Just wanted to get a sense of, we still think this is moving in the right direction, kind of making progress. I mean, we've done a lot of extensions on this one. I just want to...
Duly noted. And it is moving in the right direction. I think that the significant work that the development team needs to do around financing and site coordination, which they have been working on with Boston Public Schools, but site coordination, the component around getting their schematics and working drawings underway, as well as the work around financing and the affordability components as well, is an important piece of work to be done before we come for final designation. So.
Okay.
You know, I've been supportive of extensions on this project for years, and I continue to believe in the value of citing a museum in this location as part of a larger economic development effort. It's an extraordinary site across from police headquarters, adjacent to a health center, adjacent to a school, midway between two transit stops, only a few blocks from the economic boom that's taking place in Dudley, just a couple of blocks from a major mosque. It really is an extraordinary site, and it's, I think, a little confounding now to me that it's taking so long for this to come together, despite the ongoing support of this board and many others. I commend the development team on having a new housing partner who, as I understand things, will significantly reduce the likelihood that the housing on the site will become student housing, which of course has always been a large risk for this particular site, and would have potentially not the most stabilizing influences on this particular neighborhood. But it's very troubling to me after all of this time that two elements remain unresolved. One is that given all of the capital investment that has flowed through Boston over the last few years, I mean, this board alone has approved, I think, something on the order of $14 or $15 billion worth of investment since I've been on the board in the last 3 years. It's really dumbfounding to me that the private financing for this particular parcel, given its location and its viability, hasn't been resolved. And I think it's time to really fish or cut bait in terms of the private financing for the development. And the other thing is that after all this time, I'm still a little confounded that we haven't seen a plan B around what the public financing would be in the event something happens that puts the public financing at risk in any way. We've got a great site. It's not remote. It's got all of the assets that any development site in the city could hope for. And yet this process goes on and on and on. So I'm not raising a question, as my colleague did. I'm raising an admonition that it's time to get these issues resolved so that we can get shovels in the ground and get this project forward.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, if there's no further questions, a motion is in order.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you, Dana. Item number 8. Request authorization to extend the tentative designation of Madison Tropical LLC as redeveloper of a portion of Parcel 10 of the Southwest Corridor Development Plan, known as Parcel B, and to execute an amended license agreement for continued use of parking and construction staging. Dana.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and Secretary Polhemus. The Madison Tropical team is working diligently on aspects of its project, including the near completion of the 2101 Washington Street portion of the campus, which is slated to have occupancy in December of this year. In addition, the work that's being done to tenant and pull together financing for the 2085 Washington Street component of the project, which is really phase 3, is well underway. The development team has engaged the services of NAI Honeyman to find tenants that would be appropriate to the site and within the district, many of whom might be from the medical area and other sorts of uses that would be appropriate for job creation and bringing vitality and activity to this part of the district. Great deal of confidence in the work that the development team has done in terms of looking at issues around job creation, looking at the construction and hiring practices as well, and confidence also that the work they'll be doing in the next time frame of this designation can be completed.
Okay, thank you, Dana. Any questions on the board? No questions. Motion's in order?
So moved.
Second.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
Thanks
you,
very
Dana.
much.
Item number 9. request authorization to issue a certificate of approval in accordance with Article 80E, Small Project Review of the Zoning Code for the construction of a residential building consisting of 9 condominium units, 13 parking spaces, and a bicycle storage, and a 10,574 square feet of commercial retail building located at 110 Savin Hill Ave, and to recommend approval to the Board of Appeal for all necessary zoning relief and to take all related actions. John.
Good afternoon, Chairman Burke, members of the board, Secretary Polhemus. The proponent, 102 110 Savin Hill Avenue, LLC, filed their Article 80 application with the BPDA on June 21st, proposing a 2-building mixed-use development in Dorchester, totaling approximately 22,475 square feet. A BPDA public meeting was held on June 29th at the Cristo Rey High School, located next door at 100 Savin Hill Avenue, and the comment period concluded on July 21st. The public meeting had a large turnout, and the proposal was enthusiastically supported and received. The proposed project has unanimous support from the community. It also has the support of the Columbia Savin Hill Civic Association, the Mayor's Office, City Councilor George's office, as well as State Representative Hunt. The proposed project is seeking zoning relief for several variances. However, the BPDA staff believe the proposed project is consistent within the context and ongoing development in the Dorchester Neighborhood District. After considerable review of the design, the requested variances are appropriate for the proposal. The proposed project is not subject to the inclusionary development policy. The proponent is making a $10,000 donation to the St. Mary's Center for Women and Children. This funding will be used for family-centered programs that support 600 women and children annually with shelter, clinical and educational services, job training, employment placement, and search for permanent affordable housing. At this time, I would like to introduce Attorney John Polgini from the development team to continue the presentation. John?
Thank you, John.
Excuse me. Good afternoon, Director Golden, Secretary Palamas, Mr. Chairman. My name is John Polgini. I'm the attorney for the 102 110 Savin Hill Ave LLC. I'm going to be very brief because there are several members of the team that would like to speak to you all. I'd just like to take the opportunity at this point to thank John Campbell, Cynthia Daughter, Ashley Kerr, and Mike Christopher for their leadership throughout this process. This project before you, as John stated, it's a 9-unit residential structure, and then with a 3-level commercial building that's located on Savin Hill Ave. For the people in the neighborhood who know this neighborhood, this building has been left vacant for nearly a decade. And throughout the community process, from the very beginning, the question was never, should something go here? The question was, what exactly do the residents want to go there? In addition to that, the project site itself is located basically 60 yards from the Savin Hill train station, so it really is a TOD project. So that's all really I have to say. At this point, I'd like to introduce James Baker from the development team, and he'd like to say a few words. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Chairman Burke and other members of the board. I just want to quickly talk about the community engagement. We obviously reached out to all the different constituents, whether it was the political elected officials, the traditional civic groups, and then mainly through the community. We built a social media platform through Co-Urbanize and engaged all the members of the community to hear in 4 different languages, through text, through internet. We had a survey online and got 330 surveys completed. It was 35 questions. Took a person 10 to 20 minutes to complete. We did 2 focus groups that were 2 hours long that we had to conduct with over 50 people. And so with that said, we feel confident we know exactly what the community would like to see in the commercial building and received overwhelming support. So I think we really had a good engagement with the community, and it worked out well both ways for the community and for us. So with that, I will turn it over to Kevin Dieber from Rhodey, who will walk us through the design. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, James, Chairman Burke, members of the board. Thank you for your time this evening. I'm just going to try to go through this as quickly as possible to leave some time for questions at the end. What you're going to see in this presentation is a proposal for 2 buildings. One is a fully commercial building, 3 stories, and then an additional story below grade that we're looking at as well. And then a residential building that it contains parking, ground floor entrance behind it on the residential street. We have this slide here that really just lists out that engagement process that James mentioned, and as he and I are both residents of this neighborhood, seeing this store vacant, it was very kind of exciting to see the excitement in our neighbors and the community kind of embrace this. Nobody was short on opinions about what should go there, and we're still sort of sifting through all this data that we received. And this process did involve, us kind of going back to the drawing board. So there's a list of items here that we addressed, whether it was try to increase the amount of parking, reduce some of the density on the residential property, and kind of more smaller issues like reduce the height, and which we were all able to address. We have sort of 3 pictures here that just give you the existing context. This is the vacant store, corner store, and then the 2 buildings behind that. You're kind of standing on the corner, almost walking off of the Savin Hill T station here and looking towards the store. This is the Savin Bar and Kitchen apartments that are apartments above that restaurant taking place. You start to see a new scale is developing in the Savin Village. And we have already applied for our Article 85 demolition, received the letter that these are not significant structures. So all the buildings that we're proposing to demolish have their Article 85 certificate. From the residential street, Sydney, looking back, you're seeing the single family, the 3-family, and then the single-story commercial building that we're proposing to demolish. The site plan shows the existing 3 lots that we're on. Our primary abutter is Cristo Rey School, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that process. We've been able to work with the school and propose certain improvements to their site that kind of essentially address problems that they've had with accessibility getting into their main level, teachers not being, having to kind of drive and park and come all the way around the school to get to the front entrance for the accessible path, but also just really take care of other maintenance issues that they've had on their property. We also have looked at the village here, and there's, because of the popularity and the density of the neighborhood, there is parking still and requirements. So we've been able to work out some arrangements, and we're continuing to work on those with the school to make use of their teacher parking lot throughout other times of the day. As we kind of continue through the site plan, you see the footprints of 2 buildings. This is the corner store. We've opened it up at the corner to allow as much activity to happen right at that sort of intersection. It's a very popular thing to do in Savin Hill, is hang out on the corner, so we're providing more corner. So the other improvements that we have in the sort of arrangements with Cristo Rey are sort of pathways for some of the paths up to that ramp, but also helping them service parts of their building below, manage their trash, and manage our own loading in this spot. I'm not going to dive in really all to the plans because the renderings kind of show more about what we're doing here. The front building, this is the commercial building, 3 stories of commercial, is one where instead of the way we showed you that Savin Bar project with the apartments, it steps back off of the corner, retaining this sort of single-story commercial structure and that more of that feeling. It's also about transparency and allowing as much of the inside activity to make the streets feel safer. And then the same thing, this is the Cristo Rey lot now with a pressure-treated stair kind of removed. And this slide finally is kind of looking back again from the T. This stairwell would be open. You would enter into what we're looking at as a grocery store, sorely needed in this community. But that doorway would become the new sort of meeting place in the village, up to other tenants within that building. And I can address any other questions. One more slide here shows that the residential building behind that is starting to kind of like speak a little bit more to the residential scale and neighborhood design. The front is purposely a little bit more forward-looking. That's the last slide.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Do we have any questions from the board?
I don't really have a question, more of a comment. I just want to say to thank the developer and say that I really do appreciate the additional efforts that you made in the community engagement process and being innovative with your methodology. Well, it's not incredibly innovative, they're text messages, right? But just recognizing that, there are multiple ways to get feedback, right? To get input from the community and recognizing the language diversity and diversity of thought of your stakeholders. And I think that speaks to the acceptance of this project and probably the iterations that it went through. This agency does a lot with a little limited amount of resources. And so I just hope that this type of initiative and onus and ownership it continues to be a trend and be what the developers see as their responsibility and their worth the investment for trying to really become a part of the community, because the residents there will be a part of the community. So I hope you've started a trend, and just wanted to thank you for that.
I think we have started a trend, actually. I've had a few people reach out to me and ask me how we did it, and there's other developers are starting to conduct themselves in the same manner.
Great.
Well, I would echo that, and I also commend you on the number of design solutions that you've come up with in response to community concerns, and also as a forward-looking way of bringing a transformative structure to this particular community that I think will be a significant enhancement to the quality of life in that neighborhood. So we don't often get to talk about design as such from our perspective, but I think you've done a really great job in using an innovative design as a way of responding to and innovating on behalf of the community that's there.
Thank you. We truly appreciate that comment. We're actually, it might not sound so good. We're a little surprised that it has been accepted so well. We have seen in other places where, and even in this neighborhood, where something that doesn't look predictable, gets a lot of pushback. And I think that the spirit of this project is really just to leave it as open as possible, and everyone's kind of ready for something new, which I think is a great sign for this neighborhood and the city.
So if there's no further questions, a motion is in order.
So moved.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you. Congratulations. Item number 10, request authorization to approve the change for 340 West 2nd Street project from 29 residential units to 29 residential ownership units, with 4 IDP units, and to enter into an affordable housing agreement and to take all related action. Lance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Director Golden, Madam Secretary. On December 19th, 2013, 34 West 2nd Street project was originally approved by this board and was also approved by the Zoning Board of Appeal on March 11th, 2014, as a project consisting of 29 residential rental units and 1 commercial unit and 43 parking spaces. On July 17th of this year, a new developer, development entity, 340 West 2nd Street Realty Trust, the developer submitted a notice of project change letter to the agency requesting that the original approved project be allowed to change the project program from rental to condominium units for sale. The change from rental to home ownership will not affect the number of units, the designated number of IDP units, which is 4, the current building mass, or increase the floor area ratio in the number of parking spaces. Staff respectfully request that the board authorize the director to issue an affordable housing agreement. That's pretty much it.
Are there any questions from the board? I think we should approve it just because of the name of the architectural company.
You remember that, huh? Not to be confused.
Tim Berg.
Tim Berg.
Yeah.
Tim Berg, the architect.
A motion's in order?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All's in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No relation, no relation.
Were you supposed to recuse yourself?
Item number 11. Request authorization to issue a determination waiving further review pursuant to Section 80A-6 of the zoning code, approving the notice of project change for Phase 1 WPB1 of the Government Center Garage project to decrease 486 units to 423 units by converting 118 rental units to 55 condominium units with 63 IDP unit rental units, and replace 1,300 square feet of ground retail space to an entrance and condominium lobby, and to enter into amended and restated affordable housing agreement, and to take all related actions. Michael.
Thank you. Good evening, Chairman Burke, Director Golden, Madam Secretary, members of the board. On January 14th, 2016, the BRA board approved the first 2 phases of the Government Center Garage redevelopment project. Phase 1, known as the WPB1 component of the project, includes a total of approximately 547,940 square feet of gross floor area, comprised of approximately 546,640 square feet of residential uses, including 486 rental apartment units plus amenity space, and approximately 1,300 square feet of ground floor retail space. On June 30th, 2017, the HYM Investment Group LLC filed a notice of project change proposing the conversion of the 11 upper floors from approximately 118 rental apartment units to approximately 55 condominium units, and the replacement of the previously proposed 1,300 square feet of retail space on the ground floor with a new condominium lobby and entrance space for the new condominium component. The MPC proposes no change to the previously approved 63 on-site affordable rental units. The development plan for Planned Development Area number 96, which governs the Government Center Garage redevelopment project, including the WPB1 component, allows for the construction of approximately 812 residential units with a mix of rental apartment units and condominium units, so no amendment to the PDA is required in connection with the MPC. The MPC was presented at an Impact Advisory Group meeting held on July 27th, and the comment period concluded on August 4th. One concern we heard in the community was in regards to the 1,300 square feet of retail space that is to be converted into the lobby and entrance space. The development team has agreed to relocate that 1,300 square feet of the retail into a separate phase of the project. I'll now turn it over to Tom O'Brien with the development team, and I'll be happy to answer any questions after the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Mike. Good afternoon, Chairman Burke, members of the board, Director Golden, Executive Director Polhemus. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. My name again is Tom O'Brien. I'm with the HYM Investment Group. I'm going to try and run through this fairly quickly. Here's our site. You folks recognize it as one of the ugliest buildings in Boston. It's, it's the existing Government Center Garage. We are working on a 5-acre parcel of land that is right in the midst of downtown Boston. So we look at this as a wonderful opportunity to remake this garage into something special. This first phase, we're really excited to be here in front of you as we move forward with the first phase of redoing this garage. I know that there are many other garages in town that people are talking about redeveloping. I can assure you that these are very complicated, difficult to do projects, and this is foremost among them, but we're really excited to be in the slot and ready to move forward. There's approximately 5 acres of total developable space on the entire site, and you'll note that it's kind of divisible from the west side, which is about 129,000 square feet or so of area, and about 80,000 square feet or so on the east side. We're going to be focusing on the west side as our first project. Just a quick recap of the summary of what has been approved so far. In the upper left-hand corner, you can see that, let me see if this pointer works. Does this work? Yeah, great. This shows that this is the garage as it exists today. We're in the midst of redoing significant portions of the garage, what we call the so-called enhancement of the garage as we move forward. We have to restructure ramps. We have to create a police parking nest. There's a variety of things that we're doing inside. Significant amount of capital is being spent on the garage right now. We're here in front of you talking about this building. This is WPB1. This is the first building which will move forward as part of the project. We are beginning the project basically now, and we'll complete this project in the summer of 2020. Then after that building is completed, then the half of the garage that is the piece that is maybe most obtrusive, the piece that comes out over the east side and out over the existing bus station, that will be demolished. And then we can move in a variety of different manners, but the first is probably an office tower on this side, which is again approved. And then there's a 3-building smaller complex on the east side, which will be a great retail complex, hotel, small office building, and then a final residential building, which will completely enclose the garage so that we don't build new parking. We'll demolish a portion of the existing parking and then enclose the remaining parking with those subsequent phases. So the existing parking goes away. This gives you a good sense from a site plan perspective of how each of these buildings kind of line up. This again is the building that we're talking about today, WPB1. Not a very exciting name, obviously. It stands for West Parcel Building 1. I can assure you by the time we open this building, it will have another more interesting name, perhaps something to do with its address. Here's a summary of what has been approved. So these are the pieces that are memorialized in the PDA. I know this is a slide that's difficult to read, so I'll just quickly run through it. WPB1 is here at the top. That's a 480-foot tall building that is a residential building, approximately 550,000 square feet or so of total area. And then there's an office building here, which is WPB2. It's a beautifully designed building designed by Caesar Pelli and Associates. That's about 1 million square feet, about 528 feet tall. These two buildings, just as an aside, both that first residential building and this second office building have completed all of the Article 80 requirements, including design review and all the rest of it. So we're in the market right now with this office building seeking tenants. In addition to that, there's one other building on the west side, which is this one here, WPB3, another residential building. And then, as I said, we step down as we head towards the Greenway. There are 3 smaller buildings here on the eastern side, a hotel with a kind of building piece of it, an office building, and a small retail building in there. Here's just a quick recap of the process that we've been engaged in to date. We embrace a strong public process. We started with dozens and dozens and dozens of individual meetings and frankly putting the time in, just as the board had discussed earlier, and doing a ton of individual meetings for us has paid off very well. And so we've continued that strong public process with, as Mike said, we had on July 27th a meeting of the IAG. It was a great sort of reunion since we hadn't seen the IAG in a little bit. And we were able to talk through a number of different issues, including the retail space that Mike pointed out that I'll talk about in 1 second. And then as we go forward, we're prepared to begin the vertical construction start of that residential tower on September the 15th. You'll note if you drive by the site today that we've begun demolition of that corner of the garage, which is a moment of great celebration, I know, for Bostonians who have driven by this garage forever or parked in this garage forever. And then we'll deliver those units, as I said earlier, in 2020. Just give you a sense, again, these pictures are a little bit hard to see, but it gives you a sense of the bracing that we've had to add to the garage. This is a significant engineering undertaking. Yes, it's a design undertaking, but we've added a significant amount of bracing into the guts of the garage to make sure that the garage continues to obviously stand up. But in addition to that, we've created a new parking nest. Many of you will remember that all along New Sudbury Street for decades and decades. The police cars that serve Area A1 have parked along that street, and we've now been working with the police, who've been terrific with us and very flexible as we've tried to work this through. We have them in a temporary nest in the garage, and they're about to move in on Monday into this nest as well, which is completed and ready to go forward, which we're excited about. In addition to that, as I pointed out, we've begun the demolition of this corner of the garage, and so each evening a different section, a different bay of this garage is demolished as we go forward. So if you were out there today, there are 2 more bays that are in this photo that have actually been demolished at this point. We're excited, and then those pieces are carted off each day. We've also completed a number of on-grade improvements. This is the new intersection. That intersection at Merrimack, New Chardon, and Congress Street has been a problem forever, and so we've begun the implementation of the new intersection, the new lights, restructuring the intersection to make it more pedestrian friendly. These are all pieces that have been in place now for about a week or so. Here's the quick recap of the design of the residential tower, designed by CBT. We're really excited about this. We believe that this will be one of the best buildings in Boston. We're very excited about the lobby, which will start to change what people's perception is of that garage. So this is a multi-story lobby on New Sudbury Street here, and you can see how the lobby sort of presents itself as we start to enclose this portion of the garage. These are units that are on the exterior of the garage built into the building, and then the garage continues until we've demolished that. You can see in that lower photo. The building itself presents itself really well against the skyline. We'll have an amenity floor on the 32nd floor, as well as another one here on the 9th floor of the building. We're really pleased about how it's coming out. Just a quick note on the notice of project change. All we're doing really is converting the upper 11 stories into condominiums from what were rental apartments, which essentially means that because the condominium units are larger in size, we're reducing the total number of units. We are not, as this slide tells you, we are not changing the building height. We are not changing the building area, not changing the building design, the facade, or anything like that. We're not changing the street level pedestrian improvements that we will be undertaking. And we've also not changed the number of affordable on-site units, which is something that the community expected of us and a pledge that we wanted to keep. What is changing is a conversion of the top 11 floors from for rent to for sale. So essentially what happens is, as you can see from this slide, we go to 55 condominium units, which reduces the overall number of units down to 423, which will be, again, consisting of 55 for sale units. And then as Mike pointed out, there's a portion of the building that's about 1,300 square feet here that will become the entrance spot for the condominiums. This has not really been a great retail spot anyway. It's mid-block, doesn't really work very well. So we've agreed to remove that 1,300 square feet and put it elsewhere in the project, which we're happy to do, and I think the community has been pleased with that. So just a quick summary, again, the recap, 550,000 square feet. We're in the slot to begin, and we simply need a project change in response to the market. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions on the board?
No, it's incredibly impressive and complicated project.
It's unbelievably complicated, yeah. One of the investors asked me about a week ago, or a month ago, what keeps you up at night? And I looked at him and I said, everything keeps me up at night.
Well,
Are you
there's
kidding?
those braces there.
Yeah,
so
the whole thing keeps me up at
night.
night. I'm anxious about the whole thing, but we have a great team. We have, McNamara Salvia, I'll give them a little shout out. They're the engineering team on this. They're terrific. They have on-site folks who are there. Even the demolition team has an on-site engineer there every night with us. So we're well staffed.
Yeah, that project manager's got, oh, wow.
We have great project managers, who are used to getting yelled at every day. So, but it's great. Thank you.
Cool.
It's a wonderfully ambitious project, and I think anyone who's ever worked in this building will be happy to have it as a neighbor.
Yes, I agree. I would also point out, too, we have really great capital partners. National Real Estate Advisors, which is the advisory firm for the National Pension Fund for Electrical Workers. Awesome capital partners, and they've been really patient and great on this, so thank you.
Okay, so a motion is in order?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you very much. Item number 12 is removed. Item number 13, request authorization to issue certificates of completion for the landscape open space on parcel P1-P3 located at 39A Dale Street. This is just a certificate of completion. Any questions? A motion's in order?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. We're gonna move past item number 14 and 15 until 5:30. We're gonna go to item number 16. And it's an informational update regarding the inclusionary development policy by Tim Davis.
Thank you, Chairman Burke, Vice Chair Rojas, Member Landsmark, Director Golden, and Secretary Polimas. We are pleased here at the BPDA to be releasing the first report on the inclusionary development policy. It was released Tuesday. We've had very positive press coverage to date. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. You have the report that has been sent to you. The Inclusionary Development Policy, or IDP, was first created in 2000 and was revised most recently by Mayor Marty Walsh in December of 2015. As you know, working with us daily, that developers have three options that they can do. They can do on-site units, off-site units, or provide funding to the IDP fund. For completed projects over the life of the program, 89% have done on-site units, 26% have made a contribution to the IDP fund, and 3% have done off-site units. That can add up to over 100% because some developers do a combination of approaches. For projects that are permitted in construction or BPDA approved, 93% are doing on-site units, 12% are doing a contribution, and 8% are doing some off-site units. Over the life of the program, 1,737 on-site and off-site units have been completed. Of those, 229 were completed just in 2016. 66% of the units are rental units and 34% are condo units. The units are located across the city, but of course concentrated where development is occurring the most, with the largest percentage actually occurring in the South Boston and the South Boston waterfront, with a large percentage also in downtown neighborhoods, the Fenway, and increasingly in terms of these are completed units, but we're also seeing that for properties that have been approved more recently, a substantial number in neighborhoods including the Dorchester area, Alston, Brighton, and some other areas. This is just to give you a quick outline of when we talk about area median income, what this means. For most of our rental units, we use 70% AMI as our maximum income, and that's our current policy. And for rental units, we use 80% of AMI and 100% of AMI as our maximum. And IDP units are targeted to a range of incomes. For our condo units, 52% are at 80% of AMI, which is $75,000 for a family of 3. And for rental units, 48% are set at 70% of AMI. This is a useful point to point out that this program, while it is considered a moderate to middle income program, fits within a context of where the City of Boston has a range of programs, from the Boston Housing Authority, which has public housing and vouchers for very low income households, the Department of Neighborhood Development, which creates new housing for with both city, federal, and state subsidies that meets the needs of very low income and low and moderate income households. This is intended to meet that next range of people who are being priced out of our neighborhoods. For example, for 2-bedroom condo sales in Boston for 2016, only 4% of those condo sales were less expensive than the condos we have in our 80% bracket. So we are meeting a need that is not there in terms of the market. IDP renters have a wide range of incomes, including very low income households. 48% of renters have incomes of less than 60% of AMI or less than $50,000. Many of these can do so through the assistance of other supports such as Section 8 housing choice vouchers. Through both the existence of the inclusionary development policy and efforts of other city agencies, income restricted units are getting built in central Boston neighborhoods. Before IDP, only 21% of affordable units were built in downtown neighborhoods, while 35% of all housing units were built in these neighborhoods. Over the last 3 years, we've increased to where 43% of all units were completed in those neighborhoods, but also 43% of affordable units were increased in those neighborhoods. So we're building at the same pace in downtown neighborhoods as overall units. This is important for keeping neighborhoods that are economically diverse and making sure that there is a choice for people to live in downtown neighborhoods. We also get money to the IDP fund, which is support the completion of an additional 1,070 income restricted units located across the city. Almost $97 million has been received through 2016. Of that, $24 million was received just in 2016. Most of these units are more deeply affordable than IDP units, as the Department of Neighborhood Development marries these funds with other funds to make more affordable projects happen. 73% of units are targeted for households making less than $50,000, and of these, 18% are making less than $25,000. Just to highlight a couple of projects that have been funded this year with IDP funds, it's Patriot Homes. It's completed in 2016. It transformed the former D6 police station in South Boston into 24 apartments for veterans and their families. We have the Oxford Pingong in Chinatown. It was also completed in 2016 by the nonprofit Chinese Economic Development Corporation. What was once a parking lot is now a 67-unit building with affordable units serving 7 very low-income households and 59 low-income households. This has a substantial infusion of IDP funds from the neighboring 120 Kingston Street project, known as the Radian. And given that the significant level of development in and around Chinatown, this is an important project for maintaining that community. A third one is also one that has a veteran focus, which is the Residence at Brighton Marine. It honors the history and use of the vacant and underutilized Brighton Marine Health Center by restoring some of the historical structures and providing mixed income housing for veterans. 80 of the 102 units will be income restricted. This is an approved project that we hope will actually, it was approved in 2016. We hope it will go into the ground in 2017. Another important thing to mark out is the fact that the federal government has decreased its support for affordable housing over the years. At one point, there has been very little drop in federal support, but given inflation, those funds don't go as far. And also, we have really had to pick up the tab here in the city of Boston. Before the existence of the inclusionary development policy, 78% of the funding we used was from federal home or federal CDBG dollars. Over the last 5 years, those funds account only for 22% of what we spend on affordable housing in the city of Boston. And the IDP is now paying for 30% of what is being newly constructed as affordable housing. And also 25% is coming from the Neighborhood Housing Trust, which are linkage funds, which are also linked to commercial development. This has meant we have done an increase in funding from before IDP from $4 million a year to an average of $21 million a year. In terms of recent initiatives, policy related, we've included density bonuses in the planned South Boston Ave area and in the JP Rocks area. In terms of operations and implementation, we have the Housing Compliance Department, which Peter Sasso is in the back as our director. We have new staff who are helping to keep the trains running, as you might say. We have a new web page design that includes buckets for individual users, whether it's developers or consumers, so they can guide themselves better. We have a new dedicated phone number so that people making inquiries can get direct answers from staff, and also stronger cross-agency relationships with Fair Housing, the Disability Commission, and Neighborhood Development. In fact, we have members of all three of those here in the room with us tonight for any questions on this or the next item. We have Sarah Leung from the Disability Commission, Alexis Buckley from Fair Housing, and Amelia Najjar from the Department of Neighborhood Development. So with that, if there are any questions. Oh, also, next efforts, we want to implement the density bonuses, seek passage of the inclusionary zoning law so that the inclusionary development policy is in the zoning code, and also in operations, adding administrative hearings for issues related to owner occupancy or certification, online lottery applications, and working towards a citywide one-stop application.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Are there any questions?
No questions, just a comment. I'm so excited. This is so great. This is really, really great. And I appreciate your use of kind of data visualization to really tell the story of, you know, the program collectively, but to help us as board members, but everybody see kind of how, you know, this all adds up when we are, you know, handling project by project. And you can't really see that until, like, you bring the data together, and numbers are numbers, and it's just incredibly helpful, and appreciate the transparency as well of that. And I think, you know, oftentimes the continuum consulting engagement is like, oh, they just paid money for a name change or whatever, but it really, there was so much more that came out of that, and kind of this representing, you know, one of the 4 work streams of tracking and sharing that information is a part of that too. I know this has started before that, but I think, you know, some of those work streams and initiatives are what's really taking it forward. So yeah, I just want to congratulate you and thanks.
Thank you.
Well, I would just add that there's a tremendous amount of very useful data and dense data in this report, and not everyone is in a position to analyze what the key takeaways are. And I think it would be helpful if at the very top of the report, some of those could be highlighted in a way that would emphasize, for example, what in your report it came up towards the end, for example, the decline in federal and other outside funding, the challenges that creates for any city that's particularly trying to deal with issues of affordability and income inequality. And I think the images of the projects that have actually been done in the last year or so are very helpful, because it's one thing to look at data and something else to say, oh yeah, I know that building, and I didn't know that building had been developed as a result of a conscious policy on the part of the city to, in effect, spread the wealth in a way that benefits those who are less in a position to afford very high rents and the like. But I think that this is really great. And I also think that in the context of our having approved the 2030 plan, it would be helpful among the takeaways to reference the key steps that are anticipated coming out of that plan that will continue to reinforce the city's commitment to providing affordable housing.
Thank you. Thank you. And the webpage where you can find the report has, of course, we developed it for the press release, but I think that has many of the points that in terms of a first-time viewer, they'll see that page before they actually see the report, and it'll spell out some of those things.
Okay, thank you. We're going to go on to item number 17. Request authorization to amend the inclusionary development policy to ensure that the IDP units include units that are accessible to those with certain disabilities, and to create a pilot neighborhood diversity preservation preference policy with respect to the marketing of the IDP units. Tim.
Thank you. So the first item in this two-part vote is the goal of increasing the number of inclusionary development policy units that are accessible to those with needs related to mobility, hearing, or sight impairments. Previous to today, the inclusionary development policy did not require that any of the units supplied by a developer as part of their IDP allocation be these accessible units. However, developers are required to provide such units in the building overall as part of the state building code. For a building with 20 units or more, they're usually required to have 5% of their units be handicap accessible, or rather accessible to someone with a disability impairment, with that kind of impairment, and 2% for someone with a sensory impairment. Over the last year or so, I've worked with the Disability Commission, and we have requested those units as part of the allocation of developers on an ongoing basis. However, now, in conjunction with the Disability Housing Task Force work, which has been ongoing for about a year or so, and with the Department of Neighborhood Development, who's been spearheading that with the Disability Commission, we agreed that it would be a worthwhile effort to ask this board to require that a certain percentage of IDP units in buildings that require these units are also part of their allocation. So we are requesting that it be 15% of the IDP units in these buildings. It does not require an additional ADA requirement on the developer. It's just increasing and making a requirement that there's a part of our allocation. So for example, in a typical building with 20 or 30 units, we'll automatically get 1 unit while they may be creating 2 or 3 such units. So it's not a huge, in our meetings with developers where we've asked them for those units, it has not been, there's not been a pushback on that, but it does take a considered effort on our part to make sure that we're actually getting those units. And this just puts it down in the policy. The second piece, and Sarah Leung is here if you have any questions. We'll do those, I think, after we talk about the second part. The second part is to address potential displacement through a neighborhood diversity preservation preference. This is a new preference that we would be piloting. It would be allowed on certain properties. We would not be doing it automatically. We would be bringing it to the board as part of the board memo when we chose to do it. In this program, which has, there's already been 1 pilot done at 52 Montebello Road. The Department of Neighborhood Development used this preference for. It has been Amelia Najjar, who's here from the Department of Development, who is one of their mapping and research experts, did a lot of work on this. We are addressing a long-term desire in many neighborhoods to provide a neighborhood preference, but one that does not recreate segregation. That has been the question about using neighborhood preference, is that, you know, if it's a neighborhood that is all one ethnicity, you're just keeping a neighborhood of all one ethnicity, and rather than giving choice to people from all over the city. So it is, cannot be used in every neighborhood of the city. It can only be used in areas where not more than 60% of the population is one racial or ethnic group. So looking at this map, you can see that there's areas in the darker color are areas where neighborhoods that are more than 60% white. You see the yellow areas are neighborhoods that are more than 60% African American, and then you see an area where there's more than 60% Hispanic or Latino. So basically the gray areas, which are some substantial areas where there is a lot of growth, there's some economic growth, there's pressures on the housing market, including the JP Rocks corridor, which is one area where this has been discussed at great detail and where the pilot, the D&D pilot was held. That we would, it's combined with another feature, which is that it's also linked to areas where there are more than 30% of renters are paying more than 50% of their income to rent. Under this pilot, it would go for half of the IDP units in a particular project, and it's a preference. So if there's not sufficient people in the pool for that preference, then it would go to someone else. It goes for a set area around a development. So for example, if it's a smaller project, it might be a 1/4 mile buffer. A medium-sized project, it might be a 1/2 mile buffer, and et cetera. There are a few qualifications for being eligible for that. They need to be either 1, a rent-burdened household, not already living in a subsidized housing unit, so someone paying significant amount of their income towards rent. Elderly household incomes who are low to moderate income, renters with a disability, or renter household with a household income under 80% of AMI with school-aged children in a Boston school. So these are things meant to keep families and individuals who already live in the neighborhood to be able to stay in the neighborhood. If there's any questions?
Any questions from the board?
Not really a question, just a comment. I just think it's well, that's complicated, but I really do appreciate trying to find, procedural and policy, and trying to use policy and come up with solutions, while complicated, but kind of, they're complicated questions, they're complicated issues. And I just really commend the staff and the mayor for kind of being courageous enough to let's put these down on paper and try and see if these work, and make that effort. So again, just great job.
On the second of these initiatives, I also very much appreciate and commend the staff in the mayor's office for taking on a really tough issue around neighborhood displacement. There are very few easy solutions, and while this is clearly somewhat complex, it's worth the effort, and let's enforce it as rigorously as we can to see how well it works. On the first initiative, I think very few cities really address issues of handicapped accessibility in the development of new housing in the way you're proposing. And I have to say that I've always been an advocate for accessibility across the board. I was once on the board of the Adaptive Environment Center, now the Institute for Human-Centered Design, here in Boston, a really great group that advocates for universal design. And in that capacity, I realized that designing in a universal way is not the way most developers think. But the actual costs of putting in a wider door or having elevators that work for people with limited sight or what have you doesn't have to cost more, and in fact makes those housing units much more acceptable housing units for a wider range of people. And then a couple of weeks ago I blew out a knee and had some surgery and found myself going through rehab, and I was reminded of how many Boston residents are veterans who come back as quadriplegics, and children who are suffering from any of a range of disabilities, and seniors who find it difficult to navigate many of our neighborhoods and buildings the way they've been designed for so long. And if I was ever an advocate before, I'm a rabid advocate at this moment for the city taking the strongest possible position that it can take to make every one of our neighborhoods and every one of our facilities and our private housing accessible to everyone. It's the kind of city we want to be, and it's the kind of city we can be, but only through concerted effort.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If there's no further questions, a motion is in order.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Item number 18, request authorization to disperse $400,000 to 12 nonprofit organizations in the Roxbury neighborhood. Funding provided by the Parcel 9 Hotel Project, and to enter into 12 grant agreements. Sanal.
Good evening, Chairman Burke, members of the board, Madam Secretary, Director Golden. As you mentioned, I'm here tonight to request authorization to disperse $400,000 from the Parcel 9 Hotel Community Benefits Fund to fund workforce development and training programs with an emphasis towards Roxbury residents. We released this RFP in June of this year, received 39 applications, and we're recommending that 12 applicants receive funding, which are outlined in your board memo. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Sanal. Are there any questions? No? Motion's in order?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you. Item number 19, we need a motion to pay these bills.
I move we pay those bills.
Okay. Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Item number 20, personnel. Heather.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We just have one item for your consideration on BRA. That's the resignation of Chris Giuliani, Director of Finance, effective July 14th.
Okay, any questions? Motion's in order?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 21, Director's Update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and through you to the members. I just want to echo a couple things you've heard earlier this evening about the really fine work done by our compliance division, and in particular, Tim Davis, who is our housing policy manager. This has been a big few weeks for us in regard to some important policies, and I appreciate on behalf of the agency the acknowledgement of some of the really innovative and imaginative approaches that we've taken to some of the problems we face in the city with regard to affordable housing and accessible housing. And Tim Davis has done just a tremendous job. I can't say enough about it. The work of Tim, his superior, Peter Sasso, who heads up the compliance division, of which Tim is a member, and that whole team. The IDP report that Tim just walked you through, it's a response to our need as an organization to tell our story better. I think historically, throughout the agency's 60-year history, sometimes it gets defeatist or doesn't feel that it's worthwhile to aggressively tell the positive side. We talk a lot about the buildings being built, the numbers of units, square footage, dollar value associated with it, but we're really trying to make it clear to people just how many people are being well served, and really populations that are low income or otherwise disadvantaged in this economy. And what we're doing to address that, at least in part, we're not getting to all of it, but we're making meaningful, concrete contributions and efforts that bear tremendous results. That story was told succinctly and clearly in this Bridging the Gap, our story of the creation of middle-income housing through the Inclusionary Development Program. We conducted a roundtable a couple days ago with the mayor and the press, and Tim Logan of the Globe, I think, did really a magnificent job telling in a very straightforward manner what exactly is happening, the numbers of units being created for people who would otherwise not be well served by market forces. Again, 1,700 units created and another 1,300 units either underway or about to get underway, for a total of 3,000 units. That's 3,000 individuals and families. Far more than 3,000 people are being served by these units. And once again, I'm grateful to Tim Davis and that entire team for helping tell the story so effectively, and frankly, I'm very grateful to the Globe for helping us tell that story. One thing I don't think Tim mentioned, July 25th was the Boston Planning and Development Agency and Disability Housing Task Force Accessibility Day in Boston. We had an event out on City Hall Plaza. Mayor Boston signed a proclamation to that effect. Again, once again, validating and saluting our efforts to take important steps to make the units that are being created more accessible. And as Tim walked you through some of the efforts, working closely with Kristen McComish and her staff at the Commission for Persons with Disabilities, we're helping create more IDP units that are accessible. We made some important policy changes to that effect, so another job well done. And again, as Tim just mentioned, we have really leaned forward to identify a mechanism which we think passes legal muster to offer neighborhood preferences in neighborhoods of a certain diverse character. We hear a lot about this, whether or not we can prefer or offer a preference for people who live in a neighborhood when affordable housing comes online. It's difficult, it's legally tricky, but there are some avenues of approach to that problem, and Tim Davis and Peter Sasso's team have helped us once again in that regard by adopting an innovative policy. 2 nights ago, the mayor and I went over to the Brazilian consulate on Purchase Street over by the Rose Kennedy Greenway to celebrate the work of our own Director of Research, Alvaro Lima. Alvaro is the author of a brand new book, the Brazilian Consulate to the United States in Boston hosted a reception to salute Alvaro in the work. The book is called Brazilians in the United States, Half a Century Remaking America. And it's a concise history of the Brazilian experience in the United States over the past 50 years. So we thank Alvaro for contributing to the dialogue that is pervasive in American society right now with regard to the contributions of immigrant populations into this nation of immigrants. So we're really grateful and proud that Alvaro has added his voice to that conversation. And finally, Imagine 2030. This is an epic moment, the first citywide comprehensive general plan in over 50 years, 52 years to be exact. And a lot of BPDA staff work in the planning division, other divisions as well, frankly, a lot of other city agencies, stakeholder organizations throughout the city, and individuals, often weighing in from home through our friend digital technology, through this software program that we acquired over 2 years ago called Textizen, which allows you to weigh in small ways, and if you want to weigh in big ways, we had a variety of mechanisms to do just that. So we're grateful to the 15,000 Bostonians who added their voice to the collective determination of a vision forward. It's about Boston today, tomorrow, and as the chairman pointed out, generations. This product will pay dividends in assuring a better quality of life for all Bostonians at every end of the economic spectrum, probably for generations to come. So thanks to Sarah Meyerson and her team in the planning division, all the other folks at the BPDA who've helped, the Imagine 2030 team, Rebecca Emanuel, who had been serving as executive director till a few days ago. Rebecca's gone on to new opportunities. Natalia Urtubey. We've had a real serious interdisciplinary, interagency collaboration, both within the building and with stakeholders outside, and it's really yielded an important product for all of us. So thank you, and have a great night.
Okay, thank you very much, Brian. We're going to take a brief recess, and we'll come back and we'll do the public hearings. This is a public hearing before the Boston Redevelopment Authority, doing business as the Boston Planning and Development Agency, being held in conformance with Article 80 of the Boston Zoning Code, to consider the First Amendment to the Massachusetts College of Pharmacy University First Institutional Master Plan in connection with the proposed 704 Huntington Ave project in Mission Hill. The university seeks to expand the president's residence and add the proposed project into the university IMP area. This hearing was duly advertised on July 27, 2017 in the Boston Herald. In a Boston Planning and Development Agency hearing on a proposed petition by the agency, BPDA staff members will first present their case and are subject to questioning by members of the agency. Thereafter, others who wish to speak in favor of the proposed petition are afforded an opportunity to do so under the same rules of questioning. Following that, those who wish to speak in opposition may do so again under the same rules of questioning. Finally, the proponents are allowed a brief period for rebuttal if they so desire. In an effort to accommodate all who would like to speak about this proposal, each person will be given up to 2 minutes to comment. BPDA staff will indicate when 30 seconds remain. At that time, please conclude your remarks so that the hearing may continue and others may be heard. Ms. Sullivan will now begin the presentation.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Before you this evening is the first amendment to the Massachusetts College of Pharmacy and Health Sciences Institutional Master Plan. The amendment seeks to add one property located at 704 Huntington Avenue in Mission Hill neighborhood to the Mass College of Pharmacy IMP area. The property is an approximately 3,000 square foot brick row house, which will be used to expand the existing president's residence. The space will also be used for alumni receptions, university events, and meetings. There will be some interior renovations, but no exterior changes to the building are proposed. The amendment has received positive feedback during a 30-day comment period and was supported at public meetings of the University Task Force and Longwood Medical Area Forum. To explain the project in more detail and answer any questions you may have, and introduce Jim Green from Rubin and Rudman to further the project presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Caitlin. Chairman Burke, Member Rojas, Member Landsmark, and Director Golden. My name is James Green. I'm an attorney with the firm of Rubin and Rudman. I'm pleased to be here this evening on behalf of the university. As Caitlin indicated, the university has filed an amendment to its institutional master plan of 2014 to add a building at 704 Huntington Ave, which is shown to the right of these three buildings. The university owns presently 700 to 702 Huntington Ave, which is called the Brandt House. It is a house of the university used for functions, used for alumni relations, used for events to promote the university by its alumni, its deans, professors, and the president. The ability to add 704 Huntington Ave was an opportunity the university had last year when the prior owner, Joan Adams, passed away and her estate sold this property. By acquiring it, the university would be able to preserve it and incorporate it into the campus. We feel that it is an appropriate addition to the existing Brandt House on Huntington Ave and has received a wide range of support from the neighborhood, which is the Triangle neighborhood in Mission Hill. It's a historic neighborhood, and by preserving this building, we'll contribute to that historic fabric. If I can go to some of these slides with respect to the location, give you an aerial view. This shows the location within the Triangle neighborhood. So these series of row buildings next to the parking lot way to the left. This used to be I think it was an Arby's roast beef that had a fire back in the 60s and has never been developed. It's always been used as a parking lot. And to the right, as you go up Huntington Ave, you'll come to Brigham Circle. So this small block is an important block. The university has the main building in the center and the building at 704, which we acquired. This is a better view, I believe, of the building. You can see 704. It's a small building. The lot area is about 3,500 square feet, and the building typical for this area of Mission Hill and the Triangle, probably about 17 feet wide and about 70 feet deep. So although it's a row house, it's a tight building. As Caitlin indicated, this was filed for an amendment to the 2014 IMP. It has gone through the process of community review and LMA review. It has received support from the Triangle Neighborhood Association, from Mission Hill Main Streets, from our friends at New England Baptist Hospital, from Masco, and that type of support shows the university's commitment to the neighborhood. That commitment is evidenced in, I have a filing which the authority has, which is the 2016 biannual report. And that's 26 pages of basically the university's commitment to the city, to the civic community, and to the neighborhood, and of all the outreach programs that are undertaken by the university, but most important by the students of the university that participate in contributing to the neighborhood. We did receive, back in 2004, a support of the neighborhood for a master plan which entailed the development of an academic building on this side of Huntington Ave, which was probably the first in many, many years. And that academic building was a mid-rise, I'd say, 7 stories, in lieu of a ill-conceived plan early in the 1990s to put a dormitory here. So we listened to the community, put an academic building in. That academic building actually serves as a community space for a number of meetings that the authority has for various projects in the neighborhood. And so this is a small project. It does have the support, we believe, of a number of individuals and community groups, which is in the record. And by incorporating this into the master plan, it will be subject to all of the controls of the master plan by the university and the authority. With me this evening is Deborah O'Malley, who's general counsel of the university, and Rick Lazard, who's vice president and treasurer of the university, chief financial officer. So we'd be happy to answer any questions that you would have.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions at this time? Okay.
I'll wait.
We'll wait. So we'll proceed with the public
Thank you.
comment. Is there anyone that would like to speak in favor of this proposal? Please step right up. Anyone that would like to speak in favor?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Director Golden, Minor Perez, representing the Carpenters Union, would like to go in regular support of this proposal.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for coming. Is there anyone else that would like to speak in favor? Hearing none, is there anyone that would like to speak in opposition? Is there anyone that would like to speak in opposition? Okay. Are there any questions from the board?
This is a pretty small change, and I think a positive one along the street there. Who owns the that former Arby's parking lot?
It's Stanhope Parking, I believe. It's the Gottlieb family, I think it is.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
I think they're well known because everybody's been trying to buy it for the last 30 or 40 years. And they won't sell.
And obviously, it's carrying its weight. The university has grown dramatically, and it has always served a very global population. I mean, it's hard to go into a single pharmacy anywhere in the greater Boston area and not find students from the university who are working there, doing their internships and the like. You're in an area where every additional student has a major impact on residential uses in the neighborhood, and it's an area where there's not a lot of housing, and recent press reports have indicated that the university is now in the process of working with other universities on housing
That's correct.
Matters. But it's a big concern in Mission Hill and in that area. And so, I mean, I think it's fine to move forward with this. You know, you need to do fundraising and other kinds of public activities, but what's the status of the university's plan for housing these students? Because in some respects, it appears that your growth curve could be virtually infinite. I mean, the school's got a global reputation for turning out outstanding students.
I agree with you, and what I can, and you mentioned its partnership with with other universities. About a week and a half ago, I was over at Emmanuel with the topping off of the new Julie Hall, and half of that hall is going to be occupied by the university together with Emmanuel, and that's a great project that got approved by the board here, and will alleviate that issue with respect to housing. I know Emmanuel will be. I can't speak. I shouldn't speak for Emmanuel at this hearing, but they are. Will be housing a great number of their students, and by offering half of those units to the university, they're assisting the university in providing housing for their students too. So as other opportunities come forward, and I'm sure the board has seen more than I have, it's a way for other universities to partner and house their students instead of putting them up on Parker Hill Avenue.
Okay, I think that's a good thing, and of course, a number of universities in that area have been working on sharing arrangements,
right?
At a variety of levels. But what about your own plans?
It's something that we have to look at. It's something that we have issues with respect to ensuring that the financing is in place, that the location is in place. We are in a tight location in the LMA, as you well know, and we have used every inch of our space to the extent we can. And to the extent we can find other locations for our students that won't impact the neighborhood that they're going in, that would be a plus for us and for the neighborhoods, as well as the city.
Okay, well, that's an ongoing concern, not only of this board, but of the mayor and folks in other city agencies, where part of the commitment that has been made, and you'll see it in the 2030 plan and elsewhere, is to try to reduce the impact of students in neighborhoods without impeding the ability of our good universities to continue to grow and share the quality of their resource. So I think this board, and I'm virtually certain the administration, would welcome seeing more of what it is that could exist within the IMP around the development of housing that would reduce the impact on adjacent neighborhoods.
We'll work on it tomorrow.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's no further questions or comments and your presentation's concluded, there's a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations. Item number 15. This is a public hearing before the Boston Redevelopment Authority, doing business as the Boston Planning and Development Agency, being held in conformance with Article 80 of the Boston Zoning Code, to consider the first amendment to the amended and restated development plan for Plan Development Area Number 7, Area F, and Area 2A, located at 50 Stanford Street in the West End. The project consists of an addition of approximately 19,500 square feet of floor area to the building. This hearing was duly advertised on July 27, 2017 in the Boston Herald. In a Boston Planning and Development Agency hearing on a proposed petition by the agency, staff members will first present their case and are subject to questioning by members of the authority. Thereafter, others who wish to speak in favor of the proposed petition are afforded an opportunity to do so under the same rules of questioning. Following that, those who wish to speak in opposition may do so again under the same rules of questioning. Finally, the proponents are allowed for a period of 5 to 10 minutes for rebuttal if they so desire. In an effort to accommodate all who would like to speak about this proposal, each person will be given up to 2 minutes to comment. BPDA staff will indicate when 30 seconds remain. At that time, please conclude your remarks so that the hearing may continue and others may be heard. Mr. Rooney will begin the presentation.
Thank you. Good evening, Chairman Burke, Madam Secretary, members of the board. The proposed project is located at 50 Stanford Street in the West End neighborhood of Boston, which is within Plan Development Area Number 7 and is governed by the 1957 West End Urban Renewal Plan. The site is currently and will remain a medical office building with below-grade parking. The proponent is proposing an amendment to the amended and restated development plan for PDA Number 7 in order to add approximately 19,500 square feet of floor area to the existing 10-story building, mostly by filling in the ground level of the existing structure. The proponent also plans to improve an underutilized courtyard in the back of the site to allow for more accessible vehicular and pedestrian access, as well as to create more parking in a building entry. To facilitate this proposed project, minor modifications are required to the West End Land Assembly and Redevelopment Plan, which is laid out in detail in the board memo. These changes include, but are not limited to, updating language to allow for an increase of allowed floor area ratio from 455% to 460% of the area of the parcel. The proposed modifications are found to be minor and do not substantially or materially alter or change the West End plan. As for the Article 80 process, on April 10th, the proponent filed the First Amendment to amended and restated development plan for Planned Development Area Number 7. 2 BPDA-sponsored public meetings were held at the West End Museum on May 17th and August 8th, and the BPDA comment period concluded on May 31st. The concerns we heard in the community were related to traffic and pedestrian flow on William O'Connell Way, primarily with an originally proposed loading dock. The proponent has removed that loading dock and will use their current loading dock, which is underground in the parking garage near the site, which is why we then held a second public meeting to discuss those changes to the community. For mitigation and public benefits, the proponent shall make various sidewalk, terrace, accessibility, and streetscape improvements on public property in coordination with city agencies in and around 50 Sanford Street. Additionally, the proponent will make a $19,000 contribution to the area transportation planning exercise for the neighborhood as designed and defined by the BPDA. BPDA staff feels this project brings much needed improvements to the location and is recommending approving the proposal. I'll now turn it to Joe Hanley to present on the project and be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael. Good evening, Chairman Burke, members of the board, Madam Secretary. Attorney Joe Hanley, McDermott, Quilty, and Miller. I have with me the principals of the development team as well as our marketing and community consultants who have worked on the project before you. Also the architects for the development team, Margulies Peruzzi, Jason Costello, who I'll have take you through the bulk of the presentation. But just to lead you off with a few slides, the first slide you'll see just shows you some of the benefits. As Michael indicated, this is relatively small in scale, but it's a very important healthcare related existing asset that my client has recently acquired and is looking to upgrade. And a lot of the upgrades you'll see relate to infrastructure improvements for accessibility, which is very important to a lot of the patients and visitors to the medical office building, the creation of additional jobs, and enhancing on-site parking. The next slide shows, sorry. Here we go. There we go. Planned development area, PDA number 7. The entire area is about 9.2 acres along Stanford Street and Lomasney Way and Cardinal O'Connor Way. We are just a small part of that. We are the 10-story medical office building, which is in area F, if you will. And that PDA was made effective in 1972 and was amended in 2016 by Equity, who has sort of the lion's share of assets in there. So the proposal is limited to the renovation of the existing 10-story office building and the structured parking facility located at 50 Stanford Street. As Michael indicated, the addition is 19,500 square feet, and it's all at the ground level that's meant to better engage the street, enhance the pedestrian, patient, and visitor experience. And that includes facade, site, and parking, pedestrian vehicle access improvements. We have a defined drop-off area, as well as an existing courtyard that we think we've better utilized in order to provide better accessibility and bring this building and facility into the future. Also adding, if you go into this building, and my dermatologist is here, they're dermatology, eye surgeons and the like. The ground floor is dated and doesn't have a lot of amenities, and we'd like to update that lobby experience. Just some very quick notations on the minor modification. This is the 1957 West End Land Assemblage urban renewal. Very minor in nature. We're revising the FAR to 4.33, which includes all of that 9.2 acres. and the increase in building coverage is 7,892 square feet. There are some new paving areas, but most of the changes are to enhance the pedestrian and ground plane and public realm. Finally, again, the modification of the urban renewal plan, we would submit this is compliant with your standards for approval of minor modifications. We're talking about an FAR increase from 4.54 to 4.6, so it's minimal in nature, and it's consistent with the spirit and intent of the original urban renewal plan, and will also enhance the pedestrian experience. And I'll hand this off to Jason, but in conclusion, the final slide that you'll see on this presentation I think is perhaps the most important, and Sean Curran from Waterville Consulting worked on the community outreach, nearly a year of outreach with all of the constituent organizations, residents, neighbors in the area, very productive. And so this project is very much in keeping with the spirit of that progressive and proactive community outreach with Hawthorne Place residents, West End Civic Association, West End Place residents, the Downtown North Association, Regina Cleary, and St. Joseph's Parish, which the development team would like to thank for engaging with us and making this what we consider to be a good improvement, not just for the developer, but for the neighborhood. Jason?
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Chairman Burke, Madam Secretary, members of the board. Our site, as alluded to by Joe, let me see, let's make sure I got that's the laser. 50 Stanford is fronted on the west by Stanford Street, the south by O'Connell Way, the west by O'Connell Way, and then the Longfellow Towers to our north. The existing site definitely has some challenges around to it. Number one, accessibility is a major concern here. The existing entry to 62 is accessible via stair only or via through the garage. The existing accessible ramp located here has contributed to a significant amount of traffic parking on the sidewalk, obstructing the sidewalk and making it very difficult for pedestrians to and dangerous for pedestrians to navigate around the site. And then the existing sidewalk along O'Connell Way leading back to the west actually has significant cross slope issues relative to MAAB and ADA compliance that this project's seeking to correct. The other challenges around it is the building isn't very friendly from an urban standpoint. The first floor entries are recessed under the top of underneath the 10-story tower and are difficult to identify for both pedestrians and automobiles arriving at the site. The final component I'd like to discuss is also the courtyard. There's an existing courtyard with drive lane access that is extensively underutilized. It's limited by this drive here that is a single lane accessing up to the courtyard, an elevated courtyard. And then this presence of these planters on the courtyard really impact the ability to allow any public vehicular traffic up to that to be able to navigate in, navigate safely, and then exit again. So that's been, up until this point, restricted. The project's design has been really informed by the presence of two things. The building above, we're building out and beyond the existing tower above. And then the area highlighted in blue is the parking garage below. So we're actually utilizing, particularly along the south edge of the site, that existing foundation wall to build up with the new addition to help minimize the impact on the adjacent sidewalk. And then the electrical vault here is another important component that's below grade on the site that's informed a lot of our decisions in the development of this. So looking forward to the proposed project, looking to improve accessibility to the 62 entrance so that there would be an on-grade entry at that location, and then, on-grade entrance, extend the building Stanford addition towards Stanford Street to come out to engage the street level, address the on-curb parking with a new active loading and unloading zone for visitors directly adjacent to the entry with a ADA, MAAB accessible ramp, and then expansion out underneath the existing tower to the west. Site improvements of fixing all of the ADA sidewalk issues and proceeding. Here's the existing view from the corner of Stanford Street. Again, very difficult to identify where the entries of the building due to the overhang. And we're looking to correct that by introducing recladding 60 Stanford Street and Stanford Street in general, along introducing some terraced seating along the very steep O'Connell or Stanford Street elevation, new at-grade entry point at the corner, bringing that right up to the front. And then the O'Connell Way entrance on the south, looking to improve that with new direct ramp right at the entry door. So we'll have an accessible ramp at the entry, new stairs, and new entry highlighted by a mix of stone and metal panel and canopy. So you have a covered walkway. The courtyard, we're reconfiguring the courtyard to provide an entry point with new canopy, removing those and creating a more hospital-friendly or healthcare-oriented entry point so that there is coverage for 2 to 3 cars, as well as an accessible route for the neighbors down in the west end to come up and access the building at that location. And then Sean has been working deeply with us, and Joe alluded to this, an extensive 10-month period. This is a culmination of 10 months of working with the local civic associations, neighbors, and incorporating their comments, balancing that with our friends at BTD and BPDA to bring that forward. So,
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions this time, or should we wait till after the public hearing?
We'll wait.
We'll wait. Okay, so is there anyone that would like to speak in favor of this proposal? Please step right up if you'd like to speak in favor.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Madam Secretary, Director Golden, Minor Perez, on behalf of the hundreds of members from the Carpenters Union that live and work throughout the city of Boston, we'd like to go on record in support of this project.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for coming. Is there anyone else that would like to speak in favor of this proposal? Okay, hearing none. Is there anyone that would like to speak in opposition? Is there anyone that would like to speak in opposition? Okay, are there any questions or comments from the board?
I have a question, and I think you started to address it of saying that the one of the biggest concerns of the neighborhood was the traffic and kind of the safety of pedestrians. Do you think that, I guess, the design of the existing design really addresses some of those issues, or all of those issues, or is there anything that's still going to be kind of tough that you just can't?
I do think there will still be concerns for William O'Connell Way.
Yeah.
I know Boston Transportation Department has walked the site, and they have they're looking into how to reconfigure William O'Connell Way, and they're going to do a study on that street, ongoing study. I do think that this project does improve the quality of the pedestrian access points throughout the site with the drop-off location on the back of the site. And then there was also a recommendation from BPDA staff and BTD to put a drop-off location on the other side of William O'Connell Way. Currently, cars and trucks pull up onto the sidewalk there, blocking traffic. There was a community concern that cars may stay there for long periods of time. The development team is putting a security guard that has sight of that drop-off area. So if cars do stay there for long periods, they'll have them to move. Yeah.
Okay. And then the last question I had, I was still a little bit confused in the memo about the lease section. Are we making changes to the lease agreement, or, okay.
The lease acts as the regulatory agreement under the urban renewal plan for the property, so we don't need to make changes.
Make changes to that, okay. So there's no lease, or there's no like changes in ownership or anything like that with this? This is just...
That occurred
Way
earlier.
back, okay, got it, okay.
Is there an expansion of the interior space? And if so, what is the intended use for that?
There is an addition of interior space, and it's a mix of enlarging the main lobby for the building currently due to the volume of visitors arriving. It's very congested, so we're expanding the lobby and introducing approximately 13,000 square feet of new tenant space on the first floor, and then in the basement it is all tenant space. And I have that. It's approximately 4,700 square feet in the basement that would be proposed tenant space for either
Medical uses?
Medical uses or potentially retail or retail medical are available.
Related to the principal use. As in medical office.
Related to the principal use. Okay. So I guess the only comment I'd make based on the renderings, there's a lot going on in this neighborhood right now, and there will be hundreds of new units of housing and other improvements going on. So it's not likely that traffic will be reduced very much, until the neighborhood is full of autonomous vehicles or something. And it appears from these that there may be an additional need for environmental graphics and wayfinding, particularly visible from people who are driving in that neighborhood, because you're going to have a lot of people circling. And I very much appreciate that you're thinking about adding a second access point at the rear of the building. And you know better than I, people being dropped off in a wheelchair take longer to be dropped off than people getting out of, an Uber or a Lyft or a taxi. And just the logistics of moving people around this site and into it for the medical-related uses, it seems to me, can benefit from some further enhancement here. I mean, I think the overall project is a very good one and should meet the concerns that have been raised by the neighborhood. But it's also a neighborhood that's full of other medical uses, and finding this particular building and the entrance to it, even given the new facade, may still be a little bit difficult. And so I would encourage you to do what you need to do. It could be signage, it could be sculpture, it could be lighting, there are professionals who deal with that. But just to make it a little bit easier for folks to find the entrance, I think would be important.
Yeah.
Okay, if there's no further questions, then a motion is in order.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations. That concludes the item, so we need a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting adjourned.